Welcome to Thriving Together, Stories from CCEJ, a podcast from the California Conference for Equality and Justice. Our mission is to educate and empower youth and adults to lead change for equity and justice in our communities. I'm Daniel Solis, your host. In this episode, I interview Jenn Harper, Executive Director of Long Beach Day Nursery. Listen in as we discuss the process and impact of integrating equity practices focused on racial identity and racism in early childhood education. Let's listen. Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Solis. I use he, him pronouns, and I am CCEJ's Vice President of Institutional Transformation. I am joined today by Jenn Harper, Executive Director from Long Beach Day Nursery. Jenn, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, it'd be great.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Long Beach Day Nursery has been on a journey for a number of years to bring racial justice deeper into its core mission. So can you just share with us what this journey has been like and what motivated you to undertake it in the first place?
Yeah, so in 2020, Long Beach Day Nursery reached out to CCEJ to do a 6-month training. And that was when the world had shut down. There was racial justice in the news. There was George Floyd's murder. There was a lot going on in the world, and we had basically gone virtual. So we had sent our teachers home for a short time to regroup. We provide high quality early care and education, and right when COVID started, we couldn't do that. And so we had closed down and tried to figure out what are we going to do. And even as we brought people back, we still had part of the team working remotely. And so we looked into what's next for our team and how can we best support them, especially with what's going on in the news. And so we brought CCEJ in to do some training for us. And that was on anti-racism, understanding bias, how do we relate to each other. That was kind of just the start of the journey, as I'm sure you're familiar. It was like a 6-month journey of really working together and training. And from there, the following year, 2021, 2022, we did our strategic plan for the organization. And that strategic plan, it rose to the top to work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging time and time again. I think partly it was because that's what's going on in the world. It was going on in people's hearts, and it was partially due to that training that we had kind of brought to life so many of these initial kind of core concepts. So as that kind of rose to the top for our strategic plan in terms of our long-term vision of actively integrating diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into the core of our organization, it came up in the obstacles that we talked about, of what are the challenges we're facing as an organization, how to even talk about these concepts. And then we kind of settled into, it became one of the 3 core principles of our strategic plan, which was super exciting. So after this rose to the top as our strategic plan, we really had to stop and look at, so what does that mean for our organization? How do we actively integrate this into the core of our organization? And so we brought in some facilitators who helped us. Again, we were meeting virtually now because we work at 2 different centers. So how do we bring teachers together, teachers who are required to be in the classroom, who are required to be with children and keeping teacher-child ratio, administrators who are overworked. So these were, again, virtual to help us do basically an integrated planning session. And that's where some key concepts came to the top in terms of, we're going to enhance our classrooms with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in mind. We're going to do parent engagement activities and center events with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in mind. And then we're going to create a DEIB statement, which DEIB is kind of what we refer to for short for this work. So that was really exciting. We had a committee of DEIB champions that kind of, just from our 60+ staff team, people that volunteered to be a part of this. It started as probably 6 people and grew to 20. So I think there was champions inviting more people getting excited about it, just kind of trying to do their best to integrate these themes into the classrooms. And they saw some real success for an example is doing integrating graduation posters when children graduate from preschool, how to reflect the families better and what do families look like of the children in the classroom. So they made posters, displayed them. They changed we had a donuts with grown-ups. It used to be a Father's Day or a Mother's Day thing, and they changed the wording and started just very simple but very practical kind of changes that we made to the work that we're doing. And then we kind of paused and looked around and was what's next? And that's when we found another partner through EduPop, which is that we interviewed consultants, landed on them because they have specifically early care and education experience. And they worked with our team. They did multiple training sessions in person with our team. They went into the classrooms and did real direct coaching in terms of, okay, now we have these materials. We made an investment in materials, in books and toys and supplies for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And they worked with our teachers of like, so now I have this, doll in a native dress. What do we do with this? And we don't want just to sit in the classroom. And so they really worked with our team to explore opportunities of how do we truly integrate this into the work of the organization. And then EduPop helped us create a DEIB statement for the organization. So they surveyed parents and stakeholders and board members and administrators, and then did an interactive workshop and helped us create a statement. And that's kind of where we are today. We've just wrapped up that portion of the project.
That's, amazing. The whole time you were talking, I feel like I was just beaming and smiling and just kind of even going back to my own childhood, thinking about, when I was in preschool and thinking of like all the things you were naming of like how amazing that would have been. So it's just beautiful. And I just want to say thank you for doing that for the kids and the families that just are getting such an early start in this kind of like way of thinking and interacting with people. But I guess that kind of brings me to a question of like, some people might, who a little skeptically say, why do all this work? Why invest all this time and resources? And especially with kids that are so young or little, right, quote unquote. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why it felt so important to do such thorough work, right, at this age that you work with?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Well, for starters, 80% of a child's brain is developing in between the ages of 0 to 3. So this is a monumentally important time for everyone. So that's why early care and education is so important. I appreciate the question. And then why these concepts? I think it's so important that we serve a huge diversity of families. Children come with all different kinds of needs from all different kind of backgrounds. Our team is incredibly diverse, has different backgrounds, different experiences, culture, language, family of origin, all of these things, abilities. All of these things play into our workforce and the children and families that we serve. So I think it improves our work on a very kind of strategic level. We're doing better work because we're integrating this. And I think we saw real impact in our workforce. It was one of the highlights of our year last year doing this, because now the team that is overworked, understaffed, underpaid, facing all of these challenges, and yet we're doing these things that feel so fun and good and representative, and it brought our team together. Then a team is working to do, an example is during Week of the Young Child, they decorated their classrooms. Each classroom at one of our centers chose a different country to represent. So the parents in that, or children and parents in that classroom would bring things if they were from that country. They would learn about the country, and then they did like a world tour with passports and things and brought the children to other classrooms to experience the food and the music and the travel. And it's educational, it's interactive, the team got really excited, people are dressing up, it's colorful. Like there's so many advantages besides the real educational like brain functioning piece of doing this. But there's also just so many advantages in terms of how we interact with each other. That's life-giving, I think.
Well, that's all really exciting to hear, and the activities you're talking about, the way it brought people together, just even the joy, honestly, to see. I wish viewers or listeners could see your expression, because the radiance and joy of just like talking about this work and like the way you're doing is so clear. So that just seems like something's really in alignment. You've done all this intensive work, you've got the statement, you've done all this intensive training, you've like bought all these dolls and supplies and created all these events and worked with parents. So I'm just curious, like what maybe comes next, and how do you know when you've reached what a successful level of this work is at Long Beach Day Nursery?
Our DEIB statement is ready to be launched, and as an organization, we're really pausing to make sure we're ready to support it, to give it the dignity that it deserves, to really stand behind it, to really have it influence the work that we're doing. It already is. Our board has really rallied around this. It's really exciting. We have a board committee that meets every month. It's meets with board members and like administrators, sometimes teachers if they can join. We've reviewed the statement, let it soak in, and then we're planning for like what's next for the team in general. We are very short-staffed. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we've had in integrating this into the workings of the organization. And it's understaffed in a sense that those of us who are in the organization are pulled in a lot of directions, have to prioritize other things. Teachers have to be in the classroom. We have to maintain teacher-child ratio when we can't, and then we're bringing in substitutes. So those kinds of challenges are getting in our way. And so this isn't the kind of thing that we want to just rush and push forward and throw out there, slap it on the website. Like, how do we really absorb these principles, the values that we're holding on to? So I think that is next. Typically, it's the team who has told me, so to speak, along the way. Like, they were the ones who said, we want to do this training with CCEJ. Why aren't we doing anything? Why aren't we talking about what's going on in the world? And then it was the team when we're like, okay, we did that. And then we're like absorbing it and we're waiting. And the team saying, why are we just talking about this? What's next? I want to do more than just plan. I want to do, and that's when so now we're integrating it into the classroom. So to some degree, I think the team will start to say, hey, what's next for us? I think to some degree, we're trying to get our administrative capacity up to the next level so that we can do more, roll this out, and discover what's next. In terms of what does success look like, I would say we are successful. Mm-hmm. Like, we are doing this work, and it's really exciting. And we even did some post surveys recently that showed like a significant improvement in how comfortable people are talking about these topics, how comfortable they are using materials in their classrooms, how they understand diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And across the board, we saw like we were at like a low 3 to a 4, and now we're like at a high 4 to a 5 on these like rating scales. So I think we see success that way, but I think we see it in our retention rates. This is important for the workforce. I think we see it in how our families are responding to the materials that we put out, to how we interact with the families. I think there's a lot of kind of success indicators that will tell us where to go next and how we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And also just, I think, being real about what are some of the challenges and barriers, right, that it's not going to fix everything. And there's also, right, I think the criminal underfunding of early childhood education that our society chooses not to invest in, right? And so I think it's helpful to hear just how do you navigate that and still make sure you're taking care of the kids that people are working, right, and also doing this work. And I really appreciate you naming how your staff kind of lead the way in a certain way, right? And I hear like an interdependence, right, of like your job as the leader of the school is to respond and to listen, to be guided, but it's also making room for your staff to kind of be like, hey, we're ready for more. We're ready to take something deeper on. So I really think that's an important way to do this work, and not just feel like rushing into it or releasing the statement or putting it on the website, but really kind of being thoughtful of like, what are you really going to ready to take on, and what are you really ready to be held accountable, I think, in certain ways, right? So I think that's really important. And so I think that a question I have, right, is kind of connected to some of the stuff you already were talking about, which is, making these transformations. It's not easy, right? Especially when our society itself is still very much committed to white supremacist values, right? To scarcity, to not taking care of our communities the way we should. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk about just what are some other challenges that you've encountered, maybe directly related to doing this racial justice work. Were there any times that staff felt certain things? Were there any times where there were moments of confusion? Just anything that might be kind of around challenges, right, to doing this work would be helpful. Yeah.
Sure. I think especially early on when we first brought in CCEJ, this was totally new terminology, like anti-racism. It was like, what? And I think the biggest challenge I heard was people saying, I'm good. I don't need that. I don't have a problem. I don't have an issue, was the kind of the common response. And so I think really doing education conversations around this is not because there is a problem. There's a problem in society and culture in general, but as an organization, we're not saying there's an interpersonal problem necessarily, but this is like a value-based thing. How do we really stand behind this and support it? I think there was a lot of apprehension around people feeling like the comfortability. I don't feel comfortable talking about these things. Some people even saying, I don't feel comfortable speaking my mind in English about any topic, much less now I'm like worried about if I'm going to offend someone. All of those things kind of came into play of like communication pieces. And I think part of it was just getting used to talking about these terms. Like it was, CCEJ gave us such a introduction to this, to communication styles, to basic terms, to talking about what's going on in the world, kind of making it like okay. Even if I'm not great at it, it's still out there, and now we're starting to talk about it. It's interesting when we talk about challenges, and what we heard even when I was interviewing additional consultants to do the work, people kept asking like, what's the crisis, or what problem what immediate problem are you trying to solve? And I think we were in a really good space that we just believed in this work enough to move it forward, which was a really wonderful space to do this work, that we're not reacting to something, that we're being proactive in terms of how do we get in front of this and have it be values based. And funders came alongside the way in that. So I think so many funders, our state contracts supported one of our DEIB consultants, which we were surprised at, and they were really curious about how are you doing this in early care and education. We had local funders come alongside and do this. We had people who would say, I want to support your parent lending library. Okay, great. Will you support the parent lending library with a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging focus? Yes. They will. They said yes. So I think it's like, how do we layer this in keeping it front and center, that we truly do believe and support this work, and then finding ways to do the work that we have to do, that we all have to do every day, and yet layer this on as the kind of important piece to really weave it into the work that we're doing.
That's really important to share, right? I think just being kind of like focused on it and speaking kind of the story about why it's central to the work you're doing. And so I'm kind of curious, like, you as an individual leader, right? Because I know you transitioned into the executive director role kind of during the pandemic and during this process, right? So I was just curious, like, how do you as an individual person with, all the identities, experiences, values you hold, how do you kind of keep yourself centered on this mission and work with everything else on your plate?
I like that question. Well, as an individual, as a white, straight woman in a leadership role, I think it's so important that I take this seriously. It moves me, I value it, and I've had my own learning journey over the last many years of discovering and understanding. I'm in a book club with friends. We've read so many books now on this, which I think is just part of the kind of the start of it, but me really trying to understand my own role, my own journey, my own understanding of these concepts, what's going on in the world, how do I interact with the world. So that keeps me grounded in terms of this isn't just me. It feels like oftentimes me as an individual, it's not enough what I can do or what I can learn. But I think, and then interacting with the community of people who are doing this work like CCEJ, and realizing like there is so much of this work going on that I had no idea. I think it's really beautiful, but there's authors and writers and organizations and trainings and webinars. Like there's so much information out there that I feel like is like so accessible to all of us. So what helps me keep going back to this, I think my own personal journey and commitment to this, I believe in these values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I think my own personal journey at education has opened up my eyes to even further what the importance is. And then as an organization, it's at the top of our strategic plan. And our strategic plan was facilitated and brought in the voices of our stakeholders, of our team, our administrators, our board members, our parents. So it rose to the top, fortunately for me, because that is also like, that keeps us as kind of a guiding light moving towards that direction. So it's made it easier, I think, for me. And I have a wonderful board of directors that has really gotten behind this as well.
So given all the extensive work you've done and also the commitment to keep doing more work, but also that you're doing this with early care and childhood, right? And that's a very, unfortunately, I think, a unique place we're doing this level of work. So I was wondering if you can maybe share for other leaders or other folks working with young children what advice you have for engaging, sustaining in this work that you might offer. Yeah.
Do it. There's no reason not to. I think there are only so many reasons to figure it out. And I think any step you take in that direction is helpful, is valuable, will have an impact. It might be easy to feel overwhelmed or like there's so much going on. We all feel that. This brings joy and life. I really think it does, because it takes you out of the grind of all those things, of all the really hard things that are going on in the world. And it's like you have a moment to do something really special and significant for your team, for your organization, for the future. If we're talking about education in tiny people's classrooms, that's an opportunity to change the world going forward. Where I think oftentimes it feels like we don't have that opportunity, or I don't know where to start. There's CCEJ, I'm sure will come do a training, and they're not asking me to say this, but there's ways to get involved. I think there's small ways, even just asking your team who's interested, or what are your personal passions and interests or fears or concerns around the topic, I think brings it to light and can give you steps in terms of what direction do we want to go.
Thank you so much for all the wisdom, the honesty, and just the work you're doing. What will it look or feel like when we live in a world free of oppression and everyone can thrive?
Oh, it would be so beautiful. I mean, freedom for all. I think that people have a space to live dignified lives, to express themselves, to earn dignified wages, to have shelter. A world where like things are truly just. I think it would be a world that centers everyone's voice, not the voice of a few.
I think for me, it would be a place where all the huge range of what it means to be human is valued and respected, that people have all the basics that they need, but also that people are celebrated, that people have joy, that there's art everywhere, that babies and young kids feel safe and are protected. And so my niece was just recently born, and so that's, I think, also really transformed, I think, what I even think about, like, the world can look like and should look like. And so just thinking about her, what the world I want for her to be, right? Yeah, just where she can just be her full authentic self. She could be curious and brave and be safe, and then, just be a stubborn little Virgo that she is. Okay. So, I think in a very simple way, but yeah, I think I want that for all children, for all people, for all adults, all elders, right? Get emotional there.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jen. We really appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing, and know that you have in CCEJ supporters, allies, but also I'm sure a lot of our listeners are just going to be so excited to hear the work you're doing. So just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing, that CCEJ is doing. Thank you for highlighting early care and education. It's so, so important, and we are grateful.
Thank you again to Jen for sharing her experiences on implementing and maintaining diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging with the Long Beach Day Nursery. If you're interested in learning more about CCEJ's training for restorative justice and/or equity and justice, please visit our website at cacej.org/transformation. CCEJ's podcast is sponsored in part by LA vs. Hate, a coalition of partners led by the LA County Human Relations Commission, who are committed to preventing and ending hate in our communities. Once again, I'm Daniel Solis, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to hear more stories of thriving together.